Heilman, it's time for your take on everything that happened after we talked. Of course, there was Shohei's incredible night, but you are in LA. We'll get to Shohei in a minute. It's all that I could talk about until I saw the images of Americans exercising their First Amendment rights all over this country, and I was just as emotional over that. But you're in LA. LA, the first city where Donald Trump sort of beta tested the deployment of National Guard and active duty troops on the streets of an American city, a city living every single day with racial profiling, thanks to the United States Supreme Court's decision on that, and a city living with what feels like a new permanent presence of ICE, a city that very much came out in force on Saturday for No Kings.
Yeah, Nicole, and we'll put Shohei Ohtani to the side for the moment, although only for the moment, because my mind is still blown by what I witnessed that night. I'm not sure I'll ever recover. I decided, when we talked on Friday, I rattled off a bunch of places where there were No Kings protests taking place in Southern California, in places that you wouldn't expect. In places in Orange County that I described on Friday as these are long-standing Republican strongholds, placid, suburban, had never seen a protest or a rally before. I didn't want to go to Orange County because, Orange County is like a bridge too far for me as a Los Angelino. But I went up back to my old stomping grounds, which is almost not as Republican, but almost as placid, and certainly was the San Fernando Valley is a suburban. It's a lot like Long Island, right? It's a moderate, what used to be thought of as moderate Republican or moderate Democrat kind of place. I saw a No Kings rally outside the Sherman Oaks Galleria, home of the Valley Girl and Fast Times at Ridgemont High, where they shot a lot of that movie, and then noted that there was a rally up in Simi Valley, which people who don't know the area very well is a very Republican area. It was where Rodney King got beaten all those years ago. Both of those two protests where there were two of, I think, about 15 or 16 marches, rallies around No Kings in the San Fernando Valley alone. All of them drawing nothing like the kind of crowd that was in downtown Los Angeles, but robust crowds, and robust and all the things that people have been saying all day. Suburban, normal Americans, many of them kind of almost in an atmosphere of kind of jubilant. They're trying to show resolve, but also trying to show that they were not anything like what Donald Trump had caricatured them as. Utterly peaceful, completely chill, and also very firm in their resolve, and feeling as though they were taking part in a very American tradition of protest. And that is true. It is a very American tradition. But I will say, as someone who grew up in the San Fernando Valley, San Fernando Valley never seen things like this before. I mean, there's not a place where political activism really happens. And I don't want to be, there's probably some San Fernando Valley historian who's going to tell me that there was a protest around something that Cesar Chavez did many, many years ago. I'm not trying to claim that I absolutely know there's never been a protest of any kind in the San Fernando Valley, but having grown up there, that was not a common occurrence, and certainly not anything I can remember from the years that I spent there as a kid. And I think it's not changed very much over time. These are places where that kind of activism is not the norm by any means, and are certainly not liberal enclaves. And yet people were out in force on Saturday, and they showed the best of what this movement can be. And I would say, as a challenge to the people who are involved in organizing it, what it has to continue to be. Because the question now going forward is how to keep this momentum going, and how to continue to flex this muscle, which 7 million people is an incredibly impressive number. It's incredibly impressive. And it clearly, as you said, got under Donald Trump's skin and got the administration agitated and made him behave in a way that's, if you can believe it, even more vulgar than his usual self with that AI-generated image. But the strength of this movement, the ultimate effect of this movement, is going to only be achieved through repetition. And that's what we know about the big movements, social movements in America, whether it was the movement against the war in Vietnam or the civil rights movement. These are not these are not one by one rally. They're not one by, no matter how impressive that rally is, the work goes on. And so then the challenge to be consistent and continue to if not necessarily on this scale, but in every instance, continue to show the best side, the most idealistic side, the most peaceful side, the most determined side. That is it's a high bar. I don't have any reason to think that these organizers can't continue to do it, but they're going to have to if they want to have the kind of impact that they clearly want to have.
Well, Eddie, I actually first, your thoughts to seeing these images all across every corner of our country.
Well, I thought it was really important for Americans across the ideological spectrum to not feel helpless, to actually have an opportunity to express their genuine disdain in some instances for Trump's policies and overreach. I think as a march or a rally, they have to be understood not as the end of politics, but as dramatic forms of education, which sets the stage for the next stage of the engagement. And so I think, I know No Kings, they have an organizing call scheduled for tomorrow. And so there's something else coming, there's something else that will follow. This is part of the effort to organize, because politicians aren't going to save this country. Right. Everyday ordinary folks are. And that was a great sign this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, and just to pick up on your point, I think there's been, for 9 years now, an effort to send out the search party looking for the perfect opposition candidate to Donald Trump. And it first happens in 2015 in the Republican primary, right? What about Jeb Bush? What about Margaret? In hindsight, it's like I can barely keep a straight face saying those things, but so that's where it starts. And then the effort to stop him is around the Democratic candidate, the opposition, Secretary Hillary Clinton. And then Joe Biden does stop him for 4 years, but he comes roaring back. But all of the conversations that we've had as a country have been about finding the politician to stop him. It seems that some of what shows up in the polls as dissatisfaction with Democrats may or may not be around an agenda. I'm not sure. I'd have to look more deeply. But it is clear now that we're the only people, if we can be saved, it's up to every one of us.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, democracy is not reducible to election cycles.
Yeah.
In fact, voting is the last thing you do in a democracy. Civic life is so much more robust than every 2-4 years. And it seems that part of what we have done over the last 40 to 50 years, in some ways, is outsource our civic responsibility to election cycles. We vote or we don't, and we get about our business. Well, we can't do that under current circumstances. And so there's a question around ICE in our communities. It's a question around healthcare, governmental shutdown, question around deployment of National Guard, the extrajudicial killings all across the board. We're facing the implications of the Trump administration, the implications of folk who really hold a view of America that runs counter to what many of us hold as our view of America. And so you can't wait to the midterms to respond to that. And it can't be the object of the organizing, because if it's the object of the organizing, once the midterms happen, then you demobilize the energy. You see what I mean? So once the elections happen, people think they've done their job. No, the elections are not the end. The end is the fundamental transformation of how we conceive of the very ways in which Americans function.